Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar Open University.
Welcome to Babasaheb Ambedkar Open University. In the previous session, we have discussed various things and components of RMI environment, a distributed environment we can say that. Now in these sessions, we are going to discuss about a reusable component in Java. Generally, sometimes we are talking that reusable components are very helpful, but it is very important to understand how do we create reusable components in Java. So, Java provides us a mechanism in the form of JAVABEANS to create the reusable component and use it, and we can say share it with another built-in components in the application environment. So, JAVABeans provides us a mechanisms to create a reusable component and use it in a visual environment, we can say builder tool. So, what the JAVABeans delivers us, let us see. So, it is generally a component model. The component model allows us to create objects as components, customize a component, introspect as component, interact with other component, build other higher level components. So, component simply we can say a object that we are going to create and we want to manipulate it either itself, that means what kind of functionality we want to add with it, what kind of functionality we want from another component, and how do we want to establish interactions between different components in a, we can say, a builder tool environment in a Java environments. So, it is all about a component models. The component, it is all about, we can say, designing the visual effect of a particular component, providing a property kind of things to the component, adding the property, introspecting its capabilities in terms of method, property and events. All these things are, we can say, covered under the component model. The properties of a component involves it is a modular kind of thing, that a component should be modular. It must follow object oriented principle as we are developing the component in a Java environment. So, there must be a object oriented paradigm in the execution of a particular component interaction. When we establish interactions, we want to manipulate with another data, then there would be a, we can say, object oriented principles implementation would be there. It must be plug and play. So, whenever you are using that component in an environment, in an applications, it must be plug and play. Okay, it must provide its effect immediately once it is placed on a GUI tool or builder tool. Be generic so that it can be used in different scenarios. It should be just like a generic, it should be generic, it should not be specific to a particular thing, that it can be used only with this and it can't be used with this. It should be general, it should be general, it can be applicable to all environment. So, component is this. Now, it is all what the JAVABeans is. So, what we discussed is all about a general component kind of thing and its properties and its features. Now, the JAVABeans is, it is a reusable software component that can be accessed visually in a builder tool like Beanbox. JAVABeans is a Java class that should follow following convention. So, there are certain conventions. When we are talking about JAVABeans, we need to know certain conventions when we start JAVABeans, that it should have a no argument constructor. So, when you are writing a JAVABeans program, it should not have we can say a main method. There is no main method in a JAVABeans. Second, it must have a zero argument constructor, no argument constructor we can say. It should be serializable. Then there should be a getter and setter. So, this is a naming convention. That means, if you are having a properties like if you are declaring the variables in a program, integer number 1, integer number 2, then for this number 1 and number 2 you have to provide the getter and setter methods like get number 1, set number 1, get number 2, set number 2, like this. So, for attributes and properties we have to provide the getter and setter methods. So, that is called a getter and setter should follow the strict naming convention. If the field name is mark, then the getter and setter names should be get mark and set mark, as I told you for get number 1, get set number 1 kind of things. features that distinguish a Java bean from Java objects are Java bean provides us introspection kind of functionality. Introspection is all about, we can say, discussing the features, introspecting the functionality of a particular object. If we want to talk about that, suppose a particular object is there, then what kind of methods, what kind of events, what kind of property it delivers, that we can identify through the introspection. Then after customization is there, so we need to able to perform customization, we can customize the components once it is created. Okay. Then externally occurring events, we can handle the event, we can register the event with a particular component and handle once it is generated or triggered. We can set the property, update it, and persistence is there. Persistence is all about saving and maintaining the status of a particular component. As we know, and we said that it should be serializable, then the serializable functionality helps us to maintain the persistence. Okay, so they are directly related with each other. Serializable is all about persistence. So once a object or component is serialized, it will saved and maintain its persistence as it was. A bean is not required to inherit from any particular base class. Okay. Visual beans inherit from java.awd.component. As we talked that it is all about a component environment, a reusable component. So it is going to be inherited from, or we can say used from java.awd.component class. Beans are primarily targeted builder tools. They are also entirely usable by human programmers. Okay. Then the most important points about bean are properties, methods, and events. So what the properties is there? It is all about attributes which reflects its behavior and appearance. Okay. Then methods are simply the methods we are writing in Java program, okay, to handle the bean mechanism. And events are the simple, we can say, the event delegation model we have already discussed, and we already know in the swing environment how the events are generated, how events are handled using the event delegation model. The same model can be used in a bean environment to handle the event with different components. Now design time versus runtime. So design time is dealing with the builder tools, okay, which reflects the appearance and behaviorance. Runtime environment is all about the applications to be used, and the Java Bean API allows design time interfaces to be performed. Then we can say the property types. Most important thing in Bean is its properties. So there are various kind of properties available in a Java Bean. So among that, the first one is, we can say, simple property. The simple property deals with a single value. Okay, as suppose, as I told you that suppose there is a variable number 1 in a program. So number 1 is a property of a particular class or objects. So for that, it's there would be a method for either get number 1 or set number 1. So it deals with a single value. It is not, that means this single value is, there is no dependency for this property on another property. That means if you change the property get number 1 or set number 1, it is not going to reflect on another property. There is no dependency on another property. That's why it is called simple property. There is no dependency on another property or another component. Whenever it is going to change, it will not affect another one. Okay, it is having a getter or setter methods, as we said. Second property is the Boolean property. It's a simple property. It provides a Boolean value. Getter method follows optional design pattern. As we see, public Boolean is connected. The third important property is bound property. What is bound property? The name indicates bound. That means it is bound to a particular component or particular listener. In terms, when we are talking about event handling, that there will be a listeners. Listeners are responsible to handle the events in Java environment. So bound properties are the registered listeners are there. Registered listener objects are notified when the value of a property changes. Listener must implement the java.beans.property change listener interface. Okay, so whenever an event triggers or the property changes, then the bound listeners to particular component will be notified about the changes in the property, and it will, once the notification reaches to the bound listeners, they will handle the mechanism as per their code, we can say. So property change method requires a property change event instance in terms of event or any other instance you can specify. So, bound property is all about registration of a listeners with the event source. So, once the event is triggered, it will be notified to the registered listener and listeners will handle the event. So, this is all about bounding the property. Then the next one is all about indexed property. As the name indicates, the index means it is all about array values. So, we can set the bunch of values of same data types in the component, either we can say bunch of values by specifying the whole array through a getter setter method, or we can get the all values using the getter method. Okay. See here the prototype is there, public property element, getter method, setter method. Okay. This is the setter, this is the getter. So, property element would be the either public void get, it would be a type of the element, it would be a string, integer, whatever, and the property name that you want to specify, get name, set name, whatever, set name, get name, and the value you want to specify as an argument, either integer, string, whatever. But here as we are talking about indexed property, so we will specify the index of an array. Okay, so which index you want to manipulate. Okay, either you want to manipulate a single indexed value of or you want to manipulate the whole bunch of values of the same type. Okay, the both options are available. There are two mechanisms, one through accessing through an index and second one is accessing a whole array. See here we have mentioned that here we are specifying to a whole array, we are returning the elements, whole array is returned, we are setting the whole array this way, and we can say accessing a single value using the specified index, and we are setting it a particular index value. So, this way that index property allows us to manipulate the whole array either through all bunch of values or by specifying a particular index. The next property is constraint property. This is also a most important property, but what exactly the difference it is having a same relation with bound properties, but there is a difference between bound properties and constraint properties. So, what the difference is that constraint property is special bound property where the bean keeps track of set of veto listeners. Here the veto listeners comes into a picture, vetoable change listener. Okay. So, in case of change of constraint property, listeners are consulted about change. So, let me tell you one, we can say simple word, in simple words, that what the constraint property does is, so simply constraint property is all about approval and rejection, okay, validation kind of thing. Whether suppose one component is there and it is bound with a particular listener in a bound property. Now, here in under constraint property what happens, that one object is there which is supposed to change a property of a object. Now, all the registered listener who wants to know when the property is going to change, they all will register with a particular object. So, whenever the property is going to change, all the registered listener will be notified about the change, and once the notification reaches to the registered listeners, they will have a veto, okay, to either to approve the changes or to reject the changes. So, the rejection of changes, rejection of events is the main concept under the constraint property. That means, here the object or component will have a veto to reject the changes that has been triggered by the event. So, this is all about constraint properties. So, either it may approve or it may reject the changes, we can say, made by the other objects. So, there may be, we can say, approval from all the objects registered for the particular event and where they are waiting for the event notification, or there may be a rejection from particular objects who is not ready to accept the changes incurred by another object. Okay. The veto listeners are separate from the property change listeners. Fortunately, the JAVABEANS package includes vetoable change support class that greatly simplifies constraint properties. Okay. So, vetoable change support class is there which provides this mechanism, and it is having a vetoable change listener interface is there which allows the objects to use the veto whether to accept or to reject the changes in a property of a bin. Now, after discussing the properties of a bin, that is a simple property, Boolean property, bound property, indexed property and constraint property, this is the, we can say, real environment where we are going to create a bin and the discussed properties implementation. See here the bin box overview. So, the bin box is a part, or it is, we can say, downloaded from the particular Sun microsystem site, but right now whenever you will write a sun.com, java.sun.com, it will be redirected to the Oracle as it has been overtaken by Oracle. So, bin box will be retrieved after downloading a BDK. So, BDK is a toolkit, we can say a bin development kit, which it is same as JDK, but it is bin development kit. It is having a visuals, it is having a developer tool, GUI kind of things. So, see here what the bin box contains. So, bin box contains a toolbox having a 16 sample bin developed bin control component is there, like blue button, orange button, hover button, explicit button, jelly beans, jugglers, tic tac, and list goes on. Another container or component is bin box. Here we will place the toolbox bin over here after dragging it, and then after once we have dragged the bin component over this bin box, we can set the property in a property window of a particular component. Okay, after selecting the component, we can set the property from here, and this is the method tracer, that once we have registered the method for implementation, we can trace it over here. Okay, displays debugging messages, bin box windows test bins, background currently selected, it is simply a dashed background is there, so it is displayed. Properties customized selected bin. So, this is a main window of our bin development kit environment. So, we will use a BDK, make it very clear that to develop a bin component you need to have a BDK. So, first of all you have to download the BDK from the specified site, and once it is downloaded you have to unzip it, you will download in a zip format, then after unzip it, and once you will unzip it, it will have a number of, we can say, directory structure that we are going to discuss it right now when we will start developing a bin in a programmed environment. So, now we will look forward towards the development of a bin. Let us see how do we create a bin, and how once after creating the bin, how do we deploy that bin into our bin box environment, and how do we manipulate it. Let us see. See, in a C drive we have created bin app folders. Under that we have a bin class, but before that let me tell you the BDK once you will download, it will look like this. BDK 1.1 version is there, and once you will unzip it, it will look like this, a bins directory. When you will double click bins directory, it will have this kind of files: binbox, democ, doc, jars and library files, and then after other we can say reference files is there, information file. So, now under the binbox directory double click it, then you will find another directories, and apart from this directories there is a another file named run.batch file is there. So, as we have seen in a PPT that our bin would be containing these components. So, that will be visible once you will run the batch file. Now, let us see, double click on the run.batch. Okay, you can see now the same window appears over here as we have seen. This is the toolbox, toolkit, this is the bin box, properties window and method tracer. So, once a BDK is downloaded, you can test it like this, that means once it is executing, it ensures that BDK is running, then after we will start to write a bin in our Java application. So, let us close it now, then we will start it again once we have a bin ready for execution. In a simple Java program, what we have done here is, as we are creating a program in a directory, so we have created a package named binapp, and it is in a binapp directory. So, we have created a bean package, see here directory. So we need to write a package statement that bean is a package. Under that we are writing a import statement of awt event, as you all know. Then we are creating the class extends panel for containing controls, and we are implementing action listener as we are registering the event handling mechanism. So, and under that, see here we are creating number 1 and number 2. So, number 1 and number 2 would be known as the properties of our sum bin. Our bin name would be the class name, that is sum bin, and number 1 and number 2 is known as the property of our bin. So, as we have discussed that properties must have certain conventions, that means properties must have getter and setter. So, we are creating, see here, set number 1, get number 1, for number 2, set number 2, get number 2. These are 4 methods concerned with our properties. Then after we have created a one button named btn sum and one label named btn lbl sum, and then the constructor is there. So, constructor will be called when we create a object, but here we are not creating, we can say any object, simply see lbl sum is equal to, we are initializing the label here, as you all know, with a sum name, and button is also having a same name. Then after we are adding this button and label in the container panel, okay, it will be added to the panel, and we are registering this button, see btn sum with the action listener, and then after we are making it visible by passing a true argument set visible method of a container class, that is a panel. Now we are overriding the action performed method of our action listener. So, action performed is the method. So, what we are doing actually here, our mechanism is when we click on a btn button, or we can say btn sum button, the values we have entered in a number 1 and number 2 properties, that would be added, see here. So, in action perform, what we are doing here, we are simply declaring a one variable, and under to that variable we are calling a function calc, calculate sum. So, calculate sum does what? It will be invoked over here, and it will return, as it is having a return type integer. So, it will return number 1 plus number 2. So, when whatever value we have entered in number 1 and number 2, that will be added and returned to the variable s, and this variable s will be set as a text or label of the label lbl sum. So, the total mechanism is that in our simple bin having a two property number 1 and number 2, it adds these two values and displays it to the label as a text, as a label of text label. No, only creating the bin, that does not mean the bin is created. The most important part of bin is to create a manifest file, the second file. Okay, so what is manifest file? The manifest file is all about the file, it delivers, it provides the information about the bins of a particular package of the contained component. So, whenever we are creating any bit, we need to provide a manifest file. Manifest file is having the information that the provided file or provided component which are the Java bins. Okay, there would be number of classes in a particular directory. From the particular directory which are Java bins, that we need to know. So, in a manifest file we will provide this information by specifying two parameter attribute name. So, name will indicate that under the bin app directory, some bin named class is there which is a Java bin, that will be specified through Java bin true value. Okay. So, when you specify name, the name would be of a particular class which is a Java bin, and that will be approved by specifying a true value to the Java bin attribute. So, generally the manifest file will have two parameters, name and Java bin. So, name will be containing the Java bin name of a particular directory, and second attribute is Java bin, whether it is a bin or not. So, generally it will be true, as we are indicating a manifest file for the Java bin. So, after writing and setting this bin property in a manifest file, we will compile this program. Let us test first. that whether it is executing compiled successfully or not. So, first of all we will enter into the package and compile the program. Let us compile. So all the programs contained in BNAB is successfully compiled. Now, once compilation, we are not going to execute it because it is not a simple Java program, we are creating Java bin. So, once it is compiled, we need now the most important part after compiling the Java bin is to create a jar file. Okay. So, jar plays a important role over here because as we know that bin is a component, reusable component. We discussed it that it is a reusable component and that component can be provided to another. We can say component for interactions, we can manipulate that component, we can introspect it. So, after compiling the Java bin, we have to create a jar of a bin and that jar will be deployed into the BDK directory. Okay. So, how do we create a jar? Let us have a look at that. See. So, to create a jar, we have to pass this command into the onto the command prompt. Let us see, the jar is a command utility. We will pass CFM. The CFM stands for, C stands for create a jar file, F stands for the file name that we are specifying, and M stands for the manifest file that we have created. So, suppose if we want to create a jar for our bin, so we will pass the same command as it is. Let us see. Okay. We will pass jar, then CFM. CFM, that means first C stands for create a jar file, F stands for specify the jar file name. So, here let us create a jar file name Babasaheb Ambedkar Open University .jar. This is the file name of our jar, and the third argument is the manifest file that we have created. So, it is contained in our BNAB. So, specify it as the name of the manifest file, that is MF, and then after the last argument is the class bin class, the file name of the bin, Java bin, which is created as a, we can say, bin component. So, specify it. So, right now here we have a single bin. So, we will specify it like this, some bin dot class. But if you are having more than one bin in a single directory and if you want to create a jar of all the, we can say, class files, then instead of providing a some bin dot class, you can specify star dot class like this. Okay. Do not specify the particular class name, you can specify star dot class. That means all the classes are, we can say, going to be compressed into a jar, as we know that jar is a compressed file, a Java archive file, the full form is Java archive. So, but here we have a single bin, so we will use it that some bin class is there. So, this is the command of creating a jar. Once you will enter, it will create a jar. So, let us see that in a C drive we will have a jar file named BAOU. Check it in a C drive. See here, this is the jar BAOU.jar. Now, after creating the jar, what to do is just cut it, okay, transfer this jar file into the bin. BDK we have uncompressed directory, in a bins directory. Under that there is a jars directory, open it and paste it over here or transfer this jar BAOU.jar file. Once it is transferred, once again go back one step and under the bins directory, and under that binbox directory, go to the binbox directory and start run.batch file. Okay, when you will run.batch file, you will have all the components of BDK that we have discussed. Let us see. How do we create our bin? That you can find here. Okay, this for window is already there. So, let us see here sum bin, the first toolbox sum bin. So, this is the bin that we have created. So, generally just click it and put over here. So, see here the component that we have created is, we have created a button named sum and label named sum. So, we have kept both the names same as sum. So, it looks like this. So, what the sum, our bin is here in a bin box. We have just dragged it from the toolbox and pasted put it over here. Now, under the property window, see we have created two properties, number 1, number 2. See, you can read it over here, number 1 and number 2. So, pass the value in a number 1, let us say 15, and in number 2 let us say 20. Once entering the value in number 1 and number 2, just click on the sum button. So, you will have the answer on a label 35. So, this is the bin capability. We can create bin like this. So, bin allows us to perform all this visual kind of functionality as well. You can also bind the other controls, like let us drag another component like juggler, put it over here. So, this is a juggler component. You can bind the property with a juggler. Let us drag another button. This is a press button. Now, suppose I want to stop this juggling from playing this. So, what I will do, I will bind this bind the click button of this button to stop it. So, how do I do this? So, let us see. I am just binding this press button with a button push, action performed. Now, see, once I click it and I will bind it with a juggler. So, when I click on juggler, it will display different event target dialogs. So, I will select stop juggling and now I bind it with OK. So, now it is bound. So, when now right now the juggling is playing, once I will click on place, it will stop playing. See. So, this is all about our event binding in a Java bin environment. So, we can create a bin and we can bind the property action event of a bin in a bin environment. So, after discussing this bin environment using the BDK kit, I hope you might have understood the concept of bin, how and why it is known as a reusable component, why it is so we can say powerful in terms of reusability, as we can use this created bin with another bin to exchange the data to manipulate its capability. Okay. So, using the BDK you can create your bin, use it and manipulate the data. I hope you might have understood the concept of Java bin with the help of BDK kit, and you will have now a capability to write your own bin, deploy it into the bin box. After creating the jar, transfer the jar to the jar directory, and then after start the run.batch file, and you will have the created bin in your toolbox. Thank you very much.